I would like to thank Professor Christine and her team for associating me with this event. I'm equally honored to be speaking today at one of the finest institutions of learning, one of the most haloed portal of academic excellence, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. The legacy and record of academic excellence that Yale University has achieved is exemplary and one to be admired and wherever possible, emulated around the world. And what Professor Amy has already explained, I'm very pleased that you have a presence, of course, in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, as a former first female head of state in my country, I am first and foremost a scientist, and I have always used my pulpit to champion not just the cause of science for development, but also to speak on the empowerment of women. So I will start my speech today with a story that I recently read and I would like to share with you. A young boy is involved in a traffic accident and is immediately rushed to the hospital for urgent surgery. In the bustle and chaos of the hospital environment, the surgeon strides into the operating room. Think of the quintessential surgeon, the A-type, brimming with confidence and authority, one who knows instinctively how to take charge. Yet, this distinguished surgeon looks down at the boy and gasps, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." Indeed, the boy is the surgeon's son. Yet, the surgeon is not the boy's father. How do we explain this riddle? I know that everyone in this room can see the answer immediately. It is simple. The surgeon is the boy's mother. Yet, I also know that plenty of educated and erudite people, no less, including plenty of educated and erudite women, do not see this at first blush. They puzzle over it, circle around it. They suggest uncle, grandfather, stepfather, answers that really make little sense. Unfortunately, despite all our gains, this is the persistent reality. Similar scenarios have also happened to me in the course of my career. For example, when I was a university pro-vice chancellor and found myself alone in the office, responding to a ringing phone, the typical question I received on the other side of the line was, "Is this the secretary of Professor Gurib Fakim?" Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to thinking about women in powerful position, we are often blinded by and stubbornly products of long embedded bias that tends to mire our thoughts. The higher up the status pecking order, up to and including the position of head of state, the more this tends to hold true. We are all aware of this and fight against it on a daily basis, Mauritius and all over the world. We are also aware that this attitude pulls us back and slows the evolution of our country, our region, and the global economy. But these prejudices date back to the existence of mankind. This sort of entrenchment takes active, sustained, and dedicated effort to drive away. It cannot be done in a single generation, but it must be done. We need a complete mindset shift for this 21st century, for the full and equitable economic participation of women in order to fully unleash all of the earning power of our national economies and eventually the global economy. It is not sufficient to make progress against ingrained gender inequality. We must eradicate it altogether. We must say collectively, let us dare to be the generation to make the definitive difference. Let us act together as a community of women and rise to conquer our own timidity, learn to take risk, defeat our own prejudices, and even subconscious antagonism towards other women to face up to the fact that the elimination of gender inequity is in reach. And as Madeleine Albright once said, and I shall quote, "There is a special place in hell for those women who do not help other women." The inverse of this is women have a special power to be advocates for themselves and each other. We must become aware of that power and unleash it. Ladies, unfortunately, ultimately, It will be for us women to open the doors so that others may live and prosper. We need to direct that kindred spirit to help out the younger generation. Take our literal and figurative daughters by the hand and teach them to benefit through our experiences. Mind you, this is easier said than done because women tend to disparage other women more than do men. That's the tragedy and the paradox. Being honest with ourselves and with each other about the subtle undercurrents that can result in competition, winning out over mutual support, is the first essential step towards rooting out our weaknesses and freeing our better selves as individuals and as the sisterhood of women. So the question now is, how do we proceed? How do we build a critical mass of empowered, prosperous, confident women who can drive our own destiny? Ladies and gentlemen, let us start with the basics. Education. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon that can be used to change the world. Mandela's belief has special leverage as applied to women. Another great world leader, Mahatma Gandhi, once said, educating a girl is educating a family, a community, a nation, and eventually the world. Educating women creates an amazing ripple effect as an educated woman is likely to spend her resources on her family and on the education and health of her children. If the moral imperative to educate girls is not sufficient, the economic return should be. The IMF recently reported that a study of around 60 developing countries revealed that the economic loss from not educating girls at the same level as boys amounted to nearly $100 billion per year. Now let us pause and think of the economic cost of not sending our kids to school over the past 2 years in many parts of the world. Thus, educating a girl must not be perceived as a threat, but rather as both a blessing and as a practice that makes good economic sense. Just like Christine, I am a product of that vision. My parents believed deeply in education for their children, no less for me than for my brother. Indeed, they were right. Education has elevated me, giving me that springboard of substance and self-confidence to aim higher. Good education empowers, breaks down barriers, promotes critical thinking, and frees the individual from exclusion, and in my case, insularity. Without a good education, we start life with a severe disadvantage, one that few are able to compensate for. This will become increasingly true into the future, given the technological world in which we live. For those without education, the future is beyond bleak. Conversely, for those with a good education, avenues of opportunity open up. Countries that have invested in education have shown that it leads to not just empowerment and access to opportunities, but also to a reduction in gender inequality. This is a focus I would like to bring back within my role at the level of many boards in Africa. And this is also my own way of giving back. For all our progress, ladies and gentlemen, persistent gaps exist. And as mentioned before, this tends to be increasingly true as we move up the ladder of seniority and therefore influence. For example, while girls and young women are the majority of those who enter the biological, health, and medical sciences in many countries, they fall out of the pipeline in numbers, much greater than do men as they move up the ladder of seniority. We must do and can do better. In 2015, for the first time in the history of the United Nations, science was recognized as having a central role to play in helping humanity achieve the SDGs. Success in the SDGs will lead to a better world for all of us. This is where the investment in girls' education is critical, especially in developing countries. It is precisely in these regions that the contribution of women and girls can make the biggest differences in stimulating the economy. In the 20th century, the United States showed the way by its trailblazing education policy that institutionalized the integration of races in education settings, favored science in the thick of the Cold War, and showed equal education opportunities between the genders through the passage of Title IX. While this milestone may seem modest today, at the time they were controversial and courageous. Today, the US is still reaping the benefits of these decisions, which have helped drive the country's economic leadership, with gender equality a crucial component of that strategy. Small investments can result in large gains for girls. One extra year of primary school can boost earning potential by 10 to 20%. At the secondary level, an extra year can result in an impressive 25% boost in earning potential. Ladies and gentlemen, Mauritius, I'm proud to say, showed the way in the early 1980s. Education was made free in 1976 as my country achieved big gains in our budding manufacturing sector. The same uneducated women who were cutting sugar cane could now manipulate machines and eventually program the software that ran those machines. An educated woman contributes to the labor force, and when a woman thrives, the country thrives. Females represent over 50% of the world's population, and yet the contribution of women is less than half of many measured economic activities. Still today, nearly 1 billion women are excluded from the full participation in the economy. Africa suffers from this reality. This gender gap of almost 50% is a large contributor to lesser economic productivity in Africa than in fully developed countries. When women do progress beyond the lowest tiers of the labor market, they tend to remain at middle management positions, earning low pay in often low status jobs. Not surprisingly, the informal sector has a high representation of women, and moreover, in this sector, employees tend to be unskilled, realize unstable earnings, and are left unprotected. And of course, women dominate in unpaid jobs, caring for children and the elderly, and where they're not just uncompensated, but also unrecognized, unappreciated, and unprotected. Here I think of my own late mother. Had she not dedicated her blood, sweat, and tears, her every ounce of energy to our family, I would not be standing here today talking to you. I salute her and all women like her who toil every day to keep families whole and together. Thus, another clear message: the more women contribute, the better the economy fares. Eliminating gender gaps in economic participation implies big jumps in income per capita, a vital measure for the economic well-being of any country. These countries in the Middle East and in North Africa that have experimented by investing in the economic advancement of women have reported between 23 to 27% increase in GDP. And of course, it goes to follow that productivity begets productivity. The contribution of women in the paid workforce increases expendable income, which in turn increases spending capacity, and in turn drives a healthy economy. So if we improve the purchasing capacity of women, the economy will do better. So ladies, let's be agents of change. Let's go shopping. Ladies and gentlemen, change will happen where we make it a priority. Another area ripe for attention is the law. In many countries, women are still being subjected to all inheritance laws, and loans and bank accounts require a male co-signer, father and husband. Changes in law can become powerful agents of change. Think of progressive countries like Sweden. Sweden pro-family, pro-women policies have resulted in massive progress. Policies like publicly funded parental leave, quality, affordable government-subsidized childcare, free or subsidized early childhood education, individual instead of family income taxation, and tax credits or benefits for low-wage workers. Sweden has the highest female participation rate in the world, in part because of these policies that support family and children, and also place a premium on flexible work and parental leave policies. Is it only about policies? No, it is also about changing our mindset towards women generally. We need to sweep aside that macho attitude that has kept women behind for so long. And one area where this is happening is the field of the STEM. The ubiquity of technology and the centrality of science to sustainable development have influences far beyond the STEM find themselves to create greater participation of females in many areas, such as agriculture, for example. Ladies and gentlemen, with education and labor comes another important element that will ensure full female economic empowerment, leadership. Female leaders have been few, but those who have made it to the highest level of leadership have had a lasting legacy. I think of Catherine the Great, Elizabeth I, Wangari Maathai, and Marie Curie, my own role model. They are women who declined the well-beaten track and followed their own courageous and visionary trail. But the sad fact remains that the higher you go up the ladder, the fewer women you meet. In my country, there's less than 15% representation in National Assembly. Fewer than 10% of Nobel Prize winners are women. One irony and tragedy of this is that women leaders have qualities that can result in better leadership because they tend to make decisions based on consensus, inclusion, caring, empathy, compassion, and the focus on long-term sustainability. Their leadership has been crucial during the COVID era, and this has highlighted these very important features. Yet, in unacceptable numbers, they are denied access. We must show that by being caring, we are not being weak, and that conversely, toughness is not necessarily strength. We must help build confidence in our girls and younger women. It is denied to the girl child when she's told systematically from a tender age that she cannot become an engineer, or that physics and mathematics are too complicated for her. Her lack of confidence is also reinforced in her job. She tends to apply for a promotion when she feels she's 200% prepared, in contrast to a man who at a much lesser level of preparation will often leap forward. Only by helping change this mindset will we reset the narrative. Now I will say something that I thought I would never say. In many sectors, especially in the political world, we may only achieve the goal of equality through quotas. The slopes are too high for us to climb without some help towards the top. Quotas, unfortunately, may be a prop that we need in the initial stages. Role models and the availability of mentorship of successful women can be critical success factors that need to be plugged into the equation to achieve true parity. For example, mandates on the proportion of women in parliament and the corporate boards may be necessary for the immediate and even foreseeable future. Our hope, I hope that quotas are a temporary necessity, but they may be a necessity for now. So in conclusion, my message is simple. We need to change the mindset in our 21st century. We need to do away with this ingrained mentality that works against women empowerment. We need to keep daring to make the difference, and we need to keep investing in the ingredients that will provide for the empowerment of empowerment. Let us start looking out for each other. Let us create a world where that little girl out there in any village in Africa can grow up prepared and able to fulfill her potential. Let us ensure that nobody ever again will doubt that an African woman can become the top engineer, doctor, or that minister, and that she can lead because she has the education, the intelligence, the charisma, the drive, and maybe more importantly, the confidence, compassion, and caring attitude that this fragmented world needs right now and beyond. To succeed, we must dare. If we dare, we will succeed, because success goes to those who dare. It rarely goes to the timid. I thank you for your attention.
First of all, good day, everyone. My name is Mike Skonechny. I am the Deputy Director for the Yale Institute for Global Health. And first want to say what an honor it is for me to be part of today's event. Congratulations to Christine and the conference organizers for putting together a fantastic agenda. And also just to say what a true honor it is to be here with Dr. Gurib Fakim. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your keynote address. So for the next, I guess, 20 minutes or so, I'll be facilitating a question and answer session. So I would just turn your attention, I believe it's to the right side of your screen where there's a Q&A function where you could submit questions, and those will be then sent on to me. So I hope you take a moment to do that. But maybe to start off, Dr. Gurib Fakim, what would you, from your perspective, what do you think are what is the kind of the greatest threat or the greatest threats to achieving gender equity? I mean, you talked about some of these elements, but what do you see as really the top issues that make it such a challenge?
Thank you, Mike. There are many issues. It all depends where you're coming from. Even in developed countries, the salary gap, the pay gap is an issue. If you look in some parts, it's ingrained in the culture. And so there are many moving parts when it comes to looking at kind of mainstreaming women issues and getting women to that top position there. But I think in my country, if that was used as a lab, we have shown that feminization of sectors have happened when we started giving education to all the girls. So education, 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 and that is the way to build substance and in that girl, to build her self-confidence, because if she is fully educated, she will know her rights, she will also know her responsibilities, and she will be able to fight for it. Because I use the word fight very carefully, because she will have to engage in a fight to make herself heard, to make herself known, and it is still not a given. So we have to keep on developing the mass. We have to keep on increasing the volume and the numbers of women going through the pipe, because we are still looking at the leaky pipe syndrome. So by the time they come out of the other side of the pipe, there will be still many, many, many left. And so we have to increase numbers going through. So educate the girls as much as possible.
That's great. We have a question from the audience, and actually I'd like to build on this as well. You know, you spent a bit of your comments around leadership, and so the question is, what do you think are the opportunities to achieve parity in political leadership in Africa?
You know, in Africa, contrary to what people may believe, I mean, there are many countries that are already leading in gender parity. I can cite a few countries. If you look at a country like Rwanda, for example, a country like Ethiopia, a country like South Africa, they have had this trend of getting parity at the political sphere. But I think in many parts of the world, it's the women themselves who actually, they are discouraged because of societal pressure. And women, the society will encourage her to get up to that level of middle management. And then for her to push up beyond this, to get to that leadership position, there are, first of all, pressure from society, because just to give you an idea, a woman is not very comfortable sometimes going to a happy hour. And this is where the networking happens among men. And this is where, you know, her confidence has to be built, for example, to actually go for promotion. So these are some of the issues that hold the woman back. But as I mentioned in my talk, is that if we have a quota system, and this is how, for example, countries like Scandinavian countries, they have imposed quota in many areas, even on the membership of boards. So if these companies, they actually overstay, they don't actually abide by the quota in these organizations, the government can shut them down. So we have to have the law on our side. We need to change the mindset as well, because at the end of the day, parenting is both my father and the mother. And again, these countries, they have moved ahead with the laws. They have made it very friendly. And so they have made massive progress. And the laws in these countries, they are very, very family oriented. And so we have seen the progress that these countries have made. So there has to be a suite of issues that come together to push that woman all the way up to leadership position and position of power, because I make the difference. Why we need women at the position of power is because at the level of power, she can influence policies. And this is, again, where the damage is done, because there's not many women at this level of position of power. So when the policies are being shaped, it is shaped through the male lens. And we miss out quite a bit, because if we had brought in the female ingenuity, if we had brought in the female perspective, these laws would have worked better for the family, for society, and for the country at large. So this is one of the reasons why we need to encourage and push these women at the position of power, Leader position, there are many, but position of power, this is where we need more women.
Thank you for that. On this theme of leadership, I wonder if you could just reflect on your own experiences as a former president and other leadership roles. What kind of lessons learned might you share for our audience, when you were in those roles? What did you do? What made you successful in those roles?
I've had a great cheerleader. My father was my cheerleader, so begin with. And he was telling me all the time, there is nothing that I can't do. I could do anything. So I grew up with this confidence because my father had said to me that I can do anything, so I can attempt anything. So when I was growing up, risk-taking was second nature to me. And I am a product of that risk-taking attitude or mentality that was ingrained in me at a very early age. I'll just give you an example. When I was at school, I'd finished my, what do you call it, in the high school. And I went to visit the career guidance officer and I said, I would like to study science. I want to do chemistry because I'm passionate about chemistry. The first thing he said to me that science is for boys. You should not be studying that because you're a woman. And also when you come back to Mauritius, there'll be no job for you. So that was the first advice I got as far as studying science is concerned. I went back, I discussed with my father. He said to me, what are you going to do? I say, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to follow my heart. So that was the first thing. The second thing, I went into an area, chemistry, because I was still looking for the chemistry in any field I was operating in. And when I came back to Mauritius after my PhD, I was still looking for that chemistry. So this is when I landed in the field of medicinal plant phytochemistry. And just like Obelix, I fell into the pot and I never came out of it. And so I started an area which was totally new. I created the lab, I created the space for that particular research because I was convinced, as we are living in a biodiversity hotspot, that the chance of adding to the body of literature and knowledge was there. So I went ahead and did this. Then I left the university because I was convinced that my field of research was open to business creation. And I said that this is the future for Africa. More and more graduates need to become entrepreneurs. I left my comfort zone of academia and I started my own business. I became an entrepreneur. I took a big risk because not many people have done this. Not many people still haven't done it in my country, although this is second nature now in many parts of the world. And the other time I took the risk is when I threw my hat in the political arena. I said, if I can serve my country at the highest level, why not? Even though I was there with a David against Goliath match, because in the opposition, there were very big parties, I threw my hat in and David won. And the other risk I took, I got married.
Well, thank you.
I'm still married.
Thank you. Well, thank you for those very inspirational comments around support and risk taking throughout your career. Let me turn back to our audience question. So I think we're kind of maybe returning to your comments around policy, but as a former head of state, can you share experience about specific economic and educational programs specifically for women and girls empowerment in your country or from other countries that you have lived in?
Sorry, the policy for education generally?
For women and girls empowerment, education, maybe even other areas as well.
We know when I was at university, in the world of academia, what I was seeing is that the girls, they're doing so much better. Education was free for all. In fact, when Joe Stiglitz visited us a few years ago, he came back and wrote an article in the New York Times, an op-ed. And he said that he had been to a country where education was free, health was free, social safety net was free, was given by the government. And he came up with the comment that you think I'm going to a very rich country or to a country which is on the verge of bankruptcy, and it was none of that. So that was my country that he visited. So making education free for all and also addressing the issue of science at a very early age and learning by doing, learning by smelling, by touching, by tasting. I mean, these are very, very important components. And I think we are seeing that now in what we are increasingly referring to the fourth industrial revolution, how we need to have a different approach to education. In fact, in some places, we have to unlearn, relearn, and reskill and upskill, all that. So that's inbuilt. And we also paid plenty of attention to the vocational sector, to the non-vocational sector. And of course, with the dose of science actually put into the whole system. So this has been, I think, a game changer, as I said, but more importantly, in the initial days, giving basic education to the women generally has been a game changer as far as the economy was concerned, because we could actually leverage in the 52%. Otherwise, they would have been left on the wayside, because the policy, at least the tradition, the culture in our part of the world is it makes economic sense to be educating a boy, because the boy, well, ideally would look after the family, whereas the girl would be married off and be sent away. But now with the change in attitude, when education became free, that was a real big game changer as far as we're concerned. And now we're increasingly investing in the space of science, technology, and because we want to focus on the knowledge economy, and the knowledge economy means, of course, a heavy dose of investment in that space. Yeah.
Maybe your note around culture, another great question from our audience. Can you comment on kind of how we balance in retaining African culture while still ensuring progressive and necessary attitudes towards women and gender equity overall?
You know, if we go back to, well, history, if you go to Egypt, for example, we saw that when the excavation were happening, you know, discovery of the pyramid, there was a discovery made in terms of what we refer to now as the Ebeus papyrus. Ebeus papyrus documented plenty of recipes, and they're still providing solutions to our healthcare challenges. Now, Africa is replete with these traditional knowledge. And the custodian, they are the elderly, the custodian are women. And this area, which I have spent my life kind of trying to put the scientific framework around this, can give important medicine, which are culturally and economically acceptable and accepted. So culturally accepted because people have grown up with it, they know it, they recognize their grandmothers have used it. So that can become a big pillar in terms of addressing the health challenges. The other side, the other area that I think where Africa can make a huge gains is the tradition of, for example, the textile sector. The print, in fact, I was very happy to see Christine, beautiful blouse that she brought in, African print. And there's such a diversity, there's such knowledge. And if you look at the dye sector, and you know, there's amazing richness in the tradition, in the culture, and of course, in the inheritance that a lot of these women have got. And so by privileging, by supporting these women who are custodian of all this information, we can turn it round on its head, actually, and make it a pillar of Africa's development. And Africa can export this to diaspora, which is hungry for recipes, which is hungry for tradition, which is hungry for textile, for fabric coming out of the continent. And so I see a lot of potential in re-looking, casting a fresh eye into the culture and traditions of the continent.
Yeah, that's great. Turning back to the discussion around policy, education, other areas, how can we reach girls and women, particularly in rural areas that might not have access? You earlier were talking about STEM to technology, these kinds of opportunities. How can we support women and girls in rural areas?
I have always said this, and I would sound like a broken record by saying this again. When we are teaching our kids, I went through this because I was a child during the colonial days. And when we are teaching the alphabet to a child, very often we'll say A is for apple. And I think that if we are going to make education relevant to these girls out there in the village, we have to adapt, we have to tropicalize the syllabus and make it fit for purpose. So there's a huge approach pedagogical approach that has to be brought in so that the child, especially the girl child, because very often she'll be actually, pushed aside often enough. So when we're looking at the education of the girl child in Africa or anywhere for that matter, we need to look at two main figures. We need to look at the structure. We need to look at the stereotype. And stereotype, we know that the books are replete with stereotype. We hardly see any women who actually made it, who are, trailblazers, who don't actually, they're not represented in the books. We also need to look at the structure. So we need to look at the syllabus. So all these, if we put the ingredients right, and I think one prime example that Kenya has is precisely Wangari Maathai. I mean, she was a child growing up in rural Kenya, and she was a very bright girl. And just like myself, I mean, she had a father and a grandfather who believed in her, got her to school, and she got spotted for a scholarship. I think she came to the United States and got her graduate degree and went back. And I think she's a fantastic role model that needs to be, recognized and celebrated. Now, the question is, we need to ask Christine, how celebrated is she in the country?
That's great. One of the things, I was really struck when you were describing your kind of lessons learned in leadership. I mean, I don't know how many times you mentioned risk taking, and I wonder if you could speak a little bit more of a question here around how you built your confidence. It seems an element was your father, your family, your mother, but what were the other elements that built your confidence through your career, so you were really able to achieve those leadership roles?
I give myself the target that, if you are publishing, for example, in scientific publication, you get evaluated by virtue of the quality of your work. So I said to myself, I have to target excellence, because excellence knows no gender. And when you start adopting this philosophy, you will not compromise on the quality of your work. In fact, the quality of your thinking, the quality of your surrounding, the quality of your friends. So quality, quality, quality in whatever you're trying to do, and push for this, because that's the only thing that will matter at the end of the day. And when you start addressing the issue of quality in whatever you're trying to do in your perspective, I mean, that will boost up your self-confidence, because then you can speak to your peers, you can speak to your equals, you can speak to anybody. And when you actually go to a conference, you present the result, people will see what you're trying to do and do just that. And in fact, as I said, I created that area of traditional knowledge, learning, the IKS, the Indigenous Knowledge System. And we know right now, as we speak, that this provides a fantastic third way for adaptation to climate change. It is something that must be had, this conversation must be had. So to actually build the self-confidence of that woman, that child, we have to inculcate in her the notion that she has to drive quality in everything that she's doing. And that will automatically boost up her self-confidence. And of course, if you're a woman operating in this sphere, one thing that you also have to do is develop a very thick crocodile skin, because you'll get hit above and below the belt. So just get ready for that, and just stay focused into what you want, into what you believe, and into what you want to do, and just stay focused on the course, and that's it.
Wow, great advice. Have another great question from our audience. Are there any programs on the continent targeting educating boys and men about the benefits of empowerment of women?
Well, it's a very good question. Mike, is that we need to start having this. It is, unfortunately, myself, I drive that in all my speeches, the advantage. In fact, I say now it is no longer ethical or moral to educate a girl, but we have to drive in the economic perspective. And I think this is where, leaders will listen. It's only when you start hitting their pockets that they will start listening. So definitely there is a space for speaking to men, but speak it in a language that they understand, that makes economic sense, to get these women out there And it's just no longer just moral or ethical, but it makes good economic sense, create jobs, and speak to the politicians and speak to the policymakers, because as I said earlier on, they are mostly men, because women are not there at that table. In fact, what I have always said is, and I will say it again here, if the women don't see themselves at the table, bring your own chairs and make sure you have a space at that table so that you can shape the policy and change the narrative and make a difference.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I just have a couple minutes left. I feel like I could continue this conversation for hours with you, but I guess my last question would just be around, for the audience, what could we do really as individuals, on a day-to-day basis in our own communities, in our own countries, with our families? What could we be just doing on a day-to-day basis to support gender equity and the issues that you've been talking about?
We have to start mentoring women. And Mike, there's one thing as well I must confess, is that men, when they mentor women, these women, they go very, very far. So there is a big role for men to take that figurative daughter, figurative sister, figurative girlfriend, and boost her self-confidence. And again, tell her that she can do anything, but it needs to be done one by one, one-to-one. And that's what we can do. This is how we're going to build it. But again, stay focused on the law, because the law is the only kind of environment in which we can look at the rights of women and, of course, well, eventually the responsibility, but especially the rights, and shape that so that it works for the community and for the country.
Well, Dr. Gurib Fakim, thank you so much for those final comments. I would just say, I think I could speak for the full audience in saying what an inspiring keynote. Really appreciated your very thoughtful responses to the questions and the questions from our audience. I know I've been furiously taking notes as you've been talking about, talking about these issues. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the entire Yale community for inviting me. It's been a great honor and a great pleasure to share some thoughts with you. Have a great 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.